All right, so now we've done with part one of the 3D printing project where you've got an object picked out and it's on your desktop on your computer. So now we're going to go on to part two. So step one says to transfer your STL file or files, depending on how many files you have. It may be one, it may be more than one, from your computer to a flash drive. So this is a flash drive, and Miss Warner will have that flash drive. You get it from her, and we'll plug it into our adapter, and wait for it to come up. So it's going to come up. There it is. So it came up there. We're just going to drag whatever we want to 3D print. Remember, it has to be a .stl. If you don't have a .stl, you've got to go back into your folder because you may have drug an image file like a .jpg, a JPEG or something. It's got to be an STL. So we're going to drag our STL file down to the flash drive and let it go into there. Now, I always like to do this. It's not on the directions, but I like to double click the flash drive and make sure that it's on there. So let's make sure that that shoe organizer I just drug on there, here it is right there, okay? All right, so I'm gonna eject the flash drive. And then sneeze in the middle of this video. All right, then we'll take the flash drive out. All right, number two says to go to the 3D printing laptop. So our 3D printing laptop is always right here beside the 3D printer. So we're gonna grab it, turn it on if it's not already on. So we're gonna turn on the 3D printing laptop and let it boot up. And it takes it a little while. All right, then all we got to do is click. Now notice that on this computer there's a trackpad and there's a left click and right click separate buttons. So you can't just click the trackpad. You have to click the left click or right click. So we're going to go down here, we're going to left click, and then if you look at number 3, it says log in using student as the password. So we're going to enter the student, all lowercase, hit enter, and it's going to log us in. And it takes a little while too. All right, so once it's logged in, number 4, you're going to plug the flash drive into a USB port on the laptop. So we got one accessible right here on the right-hand side of the laptop. We're going to plug that in to the laptop. All right, and then number 5, we're going to access the flash drive and drag our STL file or files onto the desktop. So we do that from right here, okay? So if we go right there, if you get any of these pop-ups, just hover over them and you can put them back in. So we're going to go right here and we're going to double click. All right, and then it's going to come up with our dialog box where you can access everything. So you want to go over to the left, okay? So we're going to go over to where it says Lexar. That's the D drive. That's our flash drive. And we're going to click there. We're going to go into the flash drive and we're going to look for our 3D printing file. There's mine right there. So I'm going to click that, and then we'll drag and drop it over to the desktop. Just like that. So now it's on our desktop. Now we can close out our dialog box right there, and then we're going to take the flash drive out, and we're going to give that back to Miss Warner. Because that flash drive is going to be devoted to our 3D printing. We'll give that to her. All right, now we've got it on our desktop. The next thing we're going to do is number 6. We're going to double click the Apex icon. So that's our slicing software. This is not it. And while I'm here, I'm going to move it over here. So I don't want anybody getting into that one. All right, it's right here. Okay, so we're going to double click that to open up the software. And number 7, it says the Apex slicing software will open. So we'll give it a chance to open. And there it is. Okay, so it comes in looking like that. Okay. So in number 8, you're going to see a settings section on the left-hand side of the window. It doesn't say settings, but all right here are your settings, okay? So what we're going to do in number 9, we're going to set them to the specifications that we need. We're using an ABS filament, so we need to make sure it's ABS. If it's not, there's a huge drop down list. You need to find ABS, click ABS. For part B, our quality, we want a good print, so we want precise. There's a lot of other options in there. We want a precise print, okay? For our nozzle, we want primary, okay? So that will stay primary, all right? For our size in millimeters, we want 0.5. If it's not, just change it to 0.5, okay? And if nozzle is actually on secondary, that would be nozzle 2. We're using nozzle 1 right now, and that's the primary nozzle, okay? For support, we don't know right now. With that organizer I had, I don't really know right now. If you know that you're gonna need supports because you got something that's out in mid-air that needs to be printed and there's nothing underneath of it, you can go ahead and select that. And usually it would be touching build plate. But for mine, I don't know right now, and it's okay if you don't. We can set that later once we import our file, okay? For adhesion, we want a brim. So we're gonna go down and we're going to click on standard and select from the drop-down menu brim, okay? Now our settings are correct, and number 10 says now you will load your file or files into Apex. So to do that, you do number 11. You go to File, Load Model File. So we're gonna click that and it comes up with our open dialog box. So in number 12, we're gonna click Desktop to make sure we're on the desktop over here on the left, okay? And then in number 13, we're gonna navigate to our STL file or files. So mine was this organizer right here, okay? All right, I'm gonna click it, or if I need to click multiple ones, I'll do that too, okay? I only have one, so I'm gonna click it, and then in number 15, I'm gonna click Open. So once I do that, it comes in, okay? Now, in number 16, it says you will now see your object or objects appear on the simulated bed of the 3D printer. So this gray area simulates the bed of the 3D printer in size, okay? In number 17, it says you will also now see an estimated time that the print will take in the upper left corner. So it's working right now to figure out how long this is going to take with this progress bar. So we're going to let that go ahead and finish processing, and we'll see how long this is going to take. 21 hours and 35 minutes, okay? That's how long it's going to take. And if you look below there, you'll see how much filament it's going to use. It's going to use 34.06 meters of filament off the spool. So what we're going to do now in number 18, we may need to edit the file, okay? It depends on the object, all right? So there's 3 blue Apex icons near the lower left corner of the viewing window. They're right here, okay? So I want you to notice something that's not on the directions. If you notice, my object is outlined in white. That means it's selected. If I click off of it somewhere on the build plate, those 3 icons go away. If that happens, just click back on the object. You see when I hover over it, it turns a different shade of blue. If I click back over it, okay, it's gonna maximize where I can see this, because remember, part of it was up here just now. Now I can see the whole object, and I get those blue icons back, okay? So let me show you what they do, if you need them, okay? The first one, if you hover over it, it says rotate. So with that, you can rotate your object or objects on the bed as you need to, okay, if you need to, by grabbing these concentric circles. So if I click on that, you'll see I've got these concentric circles right here, okay? So I've got 3 axes. I got an X, Y, and Z axis, okay? So if I need to rotate it, if I don't, you don't have to, but if I need to, I can grab whatever axis I want by left clicking and then using one finger to drag and rotate my object on the trackpad, okay? And I can do that with any of the axes that I want, okay? There's also, in rotate, a reset button. That's gonna reset whatever you did to the original image when it first came in, okay? So if you notice, that progress bar right there is still working from where I rotated. Every time you move something or resize or do anything to this object, it has to reslice it. My advice is to give it time to do that for each movement. It'll make it a lot easier on you. So I'm gonna wait till that's done before I show you the next thing. All right, so there it is. Now it's done, okay? So let me show you what these two do, okay? Reset's just gonna reset to everything that we had when we first came in. And since I really didn't change this, I just hit it and nothing happened, okay? Lay flat. Lay flat and make sure that the object is actually down on the build plate, okay? Because sometimes when people design these things in Thingiverse, they don't program them exactly right, and it'll come in above the build plate. If that happens, you click lay flat. So what I need to do now is wait for that progress bar, and I'm gonna click that just to make sure. It's a good idea to click lay flat, just to make sure you're down even with the top of the build plate. So I'm gonna wait for that progress bar, and then I'll do that. So once it finishes, it goes away. There we go. Now I'll click lay flat just to make sure. Now, here's something that happened. It turned gray, okay? That means that since I laid it flat, it figured out the best way to lay it flat, and it turned it. When it turns gray, it either means that your object's too big for our printer or it's off of the build plate, okay? So what I'm gonna have to do is rotate it now, all right? To where it turns blue again. If it's blue, that means that it can be printed. If it's not blue and it's grayed out, it means it can't be printed. Now, since I rotated it, it's back to blue again. And now I've got to wait for the progress bar. While that's going, I will show you the next blue button. That's scale. That's where you can resize your objects. So if I click that, you're gonna see it's gonna show you the axes here, okay? It gives you a width, a depth, and a height in millimeters. This one is a little tricky, okay? This is where you can change the size of your objects, but it's a little tricky to enter the actual size you want. So what's going on here, you have a scale X, scale Y, scale Z, okay? You want them to be uniform, which means you want them to be the same, okay? So keep this uniform scale lock locked. Keep the major lock locked, okay? So when it comes in as 1, that means it's 100% as big as somebody designed it. If I want to scale it up or down, I've got to change the number. So what you could do is go into the X. You change the X, and the Y and the Z will stay, will change with it since we kept this uniform scale locked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here. I'm going to make this smaller, okay? So I clicked in the X. Now watch what happens. Sometimes when you click in there, see, I got rid of the 0 and it came back. All right? So when it happens, it's just a little tricky. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to put a 0.5 in. All right? And I've got to get rid of some of this. You're going to have to play with this until you get what you want. Now, I got it 0.5. 0.5 is in there, and notice Y and Z changes 0.5. What I did was, since 1 was 100, I entered half of 1, which is 0.5, which scaled that down and cut it in half, okay? So you can play with those those numbers there to get your object the size that you want, okay? All right, so now we've cut our print down since we made it smaller from 21 hours to 4 hours and 15 minutes, okay? And it's using 6 meters of filament instead of 34. So there's 2 other buttons here in scale when you click it, okay? Reset, if I click that, it's gonna take it back to its original size. Well, I don't want that, so I'm not gonna use it, okay? 2 max means it's gonna make it as big as it possibly can for our 3D printer. I don't want that either for right now, okay? I want it the size it is, so I'm not gonna use those, all right? So the next button over is mirror. So if I want mirror, I can mirror it, which means it's gonna flip it on all 3 axes separately. So I can mirror it with X, which just means it turned it around on the X axis, okay? If I mirror it with Y, it flipped it around on the Y axis. If I mirror it with Z, it's gonna flip it upside down. Well, I don't want any of that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna re-mirror all of those again, okay? So this was just for the purposes of demonstration and explanation, okay? So if you don't need any of those, you don't have to use them. This demonstration was to show you what those 3 buttons there do, okay? All right, and 22. If you do ever see, and I've mentioned this before, your print turned gray instead of blue, all right, it means that it's either it's exceeded the size limits of the capacity of our 3D printer, or you've got your object hanging off of the build plate somewhere to where it can't print, all right? So what we've got to do is make sure that that doesn't happen, okay? And also make sure you notice, again, to reiterate, every time you make a change, that estimated time right there is going to reconfigure. And what it's doing, it has to rebuild the horizontal sliced layers, okay? Every time you make any type of change. So make sure in 25, wait until that progress bar is updated before you make each change. It'll be a lot less frustrating for you, okay? Also in 26, as you change the attributes of the object, that means if you change the size of it or, you know, change some type of way that it's going to be printed, which is mainly the size, okay? Make sure you evaluate whether or not you need to add supports. So looking at this, it looks like some of this is going to be printed out in midair. Maybe not, because it's angled. So I don't think I need supports, but if it looks like it's gonna be printed out in midair, add supports to it. So when in doubt, always add supports and touching the build plate. I don't think I'm gonna need them for this, so I'm gonna have none, but remember, that's over here. So, and you can do that at any time, okay? I showed you at the beginning, but it doesn't have to be. So if I were to add supports, I will click touch and build plate, and if you watch, it's gonna reconfigure the slices right there. And it's gonna increase it because it's gonna need more time to build those supports. So it's gonna increase from 4 hours to whatever we get here in a minute. So let's see what we get. Well, not much. Increased about a little bit. Oh, it went dead.